Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to July 20, 2020's edition of Reading with Reference. I'm Jennifer Coons, reference librarian at the Haverford Township Free Library. And today I want to talk to you about a trilogy of graphic novels for the primary reason that one of the co-authors of this, or he's basically the author of this trilogy of graphic novels, passed away over the weekend. Congressman John Lewis passed away on July 17 at the age of 80, and I wanted to honor his extraordinary life by talking about these books. I am a fan of the graphic novel form in general, and I want to say graphic novel, graphic memoir, graphic depictions of all kinds of subject matter, including history, science, technology. I'm a very visual person, and I enjoy the graphic form. And I do want to also acknowledge that this is a format that people often think of for teens or young adults or kids. And this trilogy of graphic, I want to say autobiographical graphic books were designed for young adults and teens. I think they are just as enjoyable and interesting for adults to read. And I do think that sometimes the genre between young adult and adult is fluid. But particularly I wanted to honor John Lewis's life, and that's why I want to talk about these books. So these books were written over the span of a few years. March 1 was published in 2013. March 2, 2015, and the final in the trilogy in 2016. So these books were a collaboration among these three men. So John Lewis on the left, Andrew Aden, who began working for Congressman Lewis soon after he graduated from college. And he worked as the digital director and policy advisor to Mr. Lewis. Andrew Aden is also a published comics author, so he has some experience in that. And then Nate Powell, who is an award-winning author of a lot of different kinds of comics and graphic novels, some nonfiction, some like fantasy, and so he has a lot of experience with that, and his artwork is really, really amazing. So the three of them collaborated on this, and it was inspired, that the project was inspired when John Lewis and Andrew Aden were having a conversation, and Congressman Lewis was telling Mr. Aden how he had been inspired as a teenager. He had been inspired in his activism by reading a comic, and here it is, this comic about called The Montgomery Story, Martin Luther King in The Montgomery Story. So Mr. Aden apparently responded by, well, your life has been very inspiring. The work that you've done has been amazing. Maybe we can inspire another generation of young people by creating a comic in the comic form, talking about your life and talking about what you've done in the civil rights movement, your role in the civil rights movement. So they collaborated on this project. So the first book, I'm going to go back. So the first book, March, book 1, focuses on John Lewis's early years. He grew up in rural Alabama on a farm. The first time he ever experienced racism, like outright racism, was he was about 6 or 7 when his family took him into town. When he was 15, he heard Martin Luther King on the radio and was very inspired. He also read the comic. He started participating in lunch sit-ins as a young man, as a sort of 18, 19, 20-year-old. And so the narrative of this graphic novel kind of flashes back and forth between John Lewis's early life and 2009 on the eve of President Obama's inauguration. And the book ends with the successful desegregation of the national lunch counters. Book 2 focuses a lot on the freedom rides of the early 60s, which were incredibly dangerous for the activists who participated in them. So what they would do is I didn't know a lot about the freedom rides, and it was really interesting to learn about them, that they were trying to help. Well, historically, the Supreme Court had ruled that segregated public buses were unconstitutional, but the federal government was not enforcing that regulation. So groups of people, mixed races would get on these buses, and they would ride down, from north down to the south. And there was a lot of pushback for that. These folks were beaten. One of the buses was firebombed. They were beaten really horribly, and there was a lot of violence by whites who did not like the idea of these public buses being racially mixed. So I'm going to read you a quote from an article that I read from the New York Times that was just recently published a couple of days ago about this time when John Lewis was involved with the Freedom Riders, and also when he started to become more active in the civil rights movement. And this is a quote by Raymond Arsenault, who wrote a book called Who Were the Freedom Riders? Actually, he did not write a book. That is the name of the New York Times article. Raymond Arsenault wrote another book about this time. Anyway, so he says about John Lewis, he was absolutely fearless and courageous, totally committed. People always knew he had their back and that they could always count on him. He had an incorruptible commitment to nonviolence. So this book ends with the March on Washington, where I'm going to show you some pictures. So these are photographs courtesy of the New York Times. This is one of the Freedom Ride buses being firebombed. This March on Washington. Martin Luther King gave his famous speech there, but John Lewis also gave a speech. These are some pictures. They were all arrested, these Freedom Riders. John Lewis is right here in the upper left. So I'm going to go back to, book 3 moves on. It starts with the bombing of the Birmingham church by white supremacist terrorists, which killed the 4 young girls and injured 14 other people in that church. And it really covers the growing violence against civil rights protesters and marchers, and at Black people in general. So it follows the growing tensions in the movement, within the movement, that the movement founders and organizers were concerned that people who were involved were going to get hurt or killed. So there was tension within the movement, and it talks about that aspect as well. The book 3 really emphasizes the fact that so much progress was made through the civil rights movement, and it was very hard earned. There's a lot of sacrifices made, and it kind of, one of the cool things about this trilogy in general is that it sort of doesn't mythologize everything. It talks about the real sacrifices that were made for progress, and that the desegregation of the busing, for example, became enforced, and the freedom rides actually did work over time. And also Black people were given the right to vote, and that was a huge thing as well. Or just more voting rights that were enforced. So that is book 3. I'm going to go back to this. I'm just going to go here to this picture of John Lewis where he spoke at the March on Washington. I got a transcript of some of his speech from a website called Voices in Democracy, which is a really cool resource. You can find speeches of presidents and famous notable Americans. And so John Lewis also gave a speech at this event in 1963. And I just want to read a few excerpts to honor his memory. He says, "To those who have said, 'Be patient and wait,' we have long said that we cannot be patient. We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now. We are tired. We are tired of being beaten by policemen. We are tired of seeing our people locked up in jail over and over again. And then you holler, be patient. How long can we be patient? We want our freedom and we want it now. We do not want to go to jail, but we will go to jail if this is the price we must pay for love, brotherhood, and true peace. And then another part of the speech, he says, near the end, he says, if we do not get meaningful legislation out of this Congress, the time will come when we will not confine our marching to Washington. We will march through the South, through the streets of Jackson, through the streets of Danville, through the streets of Cambridge, through the streets of Birmingham. We will march with the spirit of love and with the spirit of dignity that we have shown here today. By the force of our demands, our determination, and our numbers, we shall splinter the segregated South into 1,000 pieces and put them together in the image of God and democracy. We must say, wake up, America, wake up, for we cannot stop and we will not and cannot be patient. So that's an excerpt from the speech that John Lewis made at the March of Washington, 1963. Thank you for being with me today for Reading with Reference, and have a lovely week.